Originally released for the previous generation of consoles, Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition manages to retain everything that made the original so great, all the while adding in new features, such as updated visuals and extra content, that make the Definitive Edition the best way to experience this adventure. Players assume the role of Yuri, a young man who resents his past and now vows to help anyone in need after leaving his previous role. Throughout the adventure, you'll meet a whole host of lovable characters who each bring their own distinct abilities and personality to your party, especially within battle, which, as with most Tales games, is easily one of the most engaging aspects of the experience. It's all real time in nature and allows the player to approach each encounter in their own distinct way, thanks to the wide range of skills at your disposal. Now, the journey will last you quite some time, and with the sheer amount of optional content on offer as well, that further expands on each of the characters' development as well as the world in which the events transpire, it really is worth the price. Overall, if you're fond of RPGs, Tales of Vesperia well and truly deserves a look, and is bound to satisfy veterans of the genre as well as newcomers alike. After a somewhat lackluster response to the previous entry in the series, Nier Automata takes the narrative into the distant future and instead focuses upon two combat androids engaged in a war with machine lifeforms that now occupy the barren Earth. The first aspect that will hit many players has to be the incredible visual design that permeates throughout the entire experience. Each character, enemy and environment you encounter all look incredible and go a long way in portraying the overall theme of the story, that of a decaying and dying world. Just as important as the narrative and visual design has to be the gameplay, which in all honesty is where the game comes into its own. Although it's not as complex as many other Platinum titles out there, it's not shallow by any means. Players have access to weapons which present both light and heavy attacks. Each usually consists of a melee or ranged weapon which allows you to take on enemies in entirely creative ways. Complementing this is the sheer amount of customization on offer, which is facilitated by the plugin system. It allows the player to tinker with their stats in ways that augment specific aspects of your build, such as movement speed or the chance of landing a critical hit. There's a lot to play around with, which in all honesty soon becomes one of the most engaging aspects of the adventure. If Nier Automata passed you by, now is the perfect time to try for yourself. I've spent quite some time with Final Fantasy 15, and after countless hours it's easy to say that the latest installment in the franchise is a real return to fun. Although a somewhat different experience entirely when compared to the various entries in the past, it manages to bring the series into the modern era, with only a few aspects holding it back from achieving what it sets out to do. As the player, you take control of Noctis and his band of companions as you journey across the kingdom in hopes of uniting with a childhood love. Now, the narrative is easily one of the weakest parts of the game, and at times can feel quite disjointed due to the nature of the open world experience, but it's not a total deal breaker. What Final Fantasy 15 does get right though has to be its combat, which seems to take many cues from the likes of Kingdom Hearts and presents it all in real time. Both Noctis and his companions possess a generous amount of abilities and special attacks that will aid you during battle. Weapons, items and magic all have a huge role to play as well, and can help lean the odds in your favour rather quickly when facing down formidable foes. If you've yet to play Final Fantasy 15, it offers up a great RPG experience, and although it's not perfect in its execution, it is still a competent adventure that deserves a look. Dragon Quest is a series that needs no introduction. Starting out life way back on the Nintendo Entertainment System, it has managed to evolve and stay relevant right up to this day. The 11th installment sees players assuming the role of a hero who lives in the small town of Cobblestone. As is tradition, he takes part in a coming-of-age ceremony that soon spirals into a tale of good versus evil and forces him, along with a cast of lovable companions, to travel the kingdom in order to bring about change within it. Complementing the main narrative is a surprising amount of side quests that manage to flesh out each location and character in meaningful ways. Battles play out in a turn-based fashion, and as you would expect, a whole host of special skills, weapons, items and equipment can all be utilised in order to make each encounter all the more manageable. From the standard goons to the outright threatening bosses, there is plenty to test your skill as you make your way through the adventure. Now, one slight downside that's worth mentioning though has to be the soundtrack, which unfortunately can get quite annoying due to it not being the fully orchestrated score that is included in the Switch version. It's not a deal breaker, but something that's worth mentioning. Overall, if you're a fan of the series, this one is a no-brainer, and for those looking to get stuck into a traditional RPG, Dragon Quest is the perfect choice. Bloodborne offers up one of the most rewarding but at the same time frustrating and soul-crushing experiences on the PlayStation 4. Sharing many similarities with the likes of Dark Souls, the player is tasked with making their way through a dark and decaying world, which is inhabited by a wide range of terrifying monsters that will do nothing but to try and stop you dead in your tracks. The combat requires the player to think on their toes. The onslaught of attacks aimed towards you can at times be quite daunting, but each defeat will only spur you on to continue to get better and ultimately master the several mechanics that are in place. You have the ability to carry several weapons at any one time, which really opens up all types of playstyles and strategies when approaching each encounter. If the action gets too much though, players can retreat to an area known as the Hunter's Dream, which facilitates all different aspects of the game, such as replenishing health, leveling up your character, buying items and clothing, or upgrading your weapons, which will all aid you out in the field. But there is a catch, as when travelling to this area, each enemy will respawn once doing so. As mentioned, Bloodborne can be rough, but for those that stick with it and get used to the unforgiving nature of the experience, you will find something totally unforgettable. The latest installment in the Kingdom Hearts franchise offers up the culmination of a series that has managed to span nearly 2 decades. It is a third-person action RPG that sees players assuming the role of Sora, the hero from the previous entries in the series, as he once again teams up with several Disney characters and visits many worlds based upon several films from Disney's catalogue. Now, the first thing to mention is that if you haven't been following the series from the beginning, the narrative can be extremely confusing, so it's a good idea to get familiar with the events that have transpired before jumping into the third iteration. Gameplay wise, the battling system may at first seem complicated, but once you get used to the range of options at your disposal, it soon becomes second nature. For example, aside from the typical options of attack or magic, there are also special attacks which can be used in conjunction with your party members, as well as summons and a new type of attack known as attractions that simulate rides from various Disney theme parks and have the potential to rack up massive amounts of damage on your enemies. Just as impressive as the combat system are the visuals, which do an amazing job of presenting each world you'll be visiting and each character you'll be encountering, which does nothing but elevate the overall quality of the adventure. So if you're looking for a challenging and rewarding RPG to get stuck into, Kingdom Hearts will offer that and much more. Dragon Age Inquisition was a real return to form for the series, with the first 2 iterations being quite different in their execution. The third outing manages to bring everything together that was learnt along the way and presents it all in a much more engaging and satisfying manner. The first main characteristic of the experience has to be the story, which manages to weave an intriguing and at the same time meaningful narrative that spans up to nearly 200 hours when you consider the amount of side content that is included as well. Gameplay wise, there are many options at the player's disposal, mainly down to the several classes in which you can select at the beginning of the adventure, including warrior, mage or rogue, that offers many ways in which to approach each situation you'll find yourself in. Facilitating the growth of your character is a skill tree system that allows you to fully customize your skills and specifically tailor your character in a way that suits you best. Combat plays out in real time and requires the player to prepare, position and effectively take advantage of each of your team's abilities in order to defeat the enemy. Complementing this idea is the tactical view camera that pauses the action and allows you to assign actions or move members around the field. It's a nice touch and adds a real strategic element to each encounter. If you're a fan of the genre, Inquisition offers up a truly unforgettable RPG that every fan of role-playing games should have in their collection. Going into Trails of Cold Steel, it's clear that a prior knowledge of the series is extremely beneficial when it comes to enjoying the narrative. It all picks up 2 years after the events of the second game and introduces players to a cast of new characters that each have their own specific story to tell over the course of the game. But like the games that have come before it, the battle system is where the experience truly begins to shine. As you would expect, each of your party members each possess their own unique advantages and disadvantages depending on the situation at hand. It's all primarily handled by something known as the Quartz system that allows you to grant each character extra abilities in battle, such as extra spells or stat boosts that really help out in tight situations. Complementing this is the Link system that allows you to intricately link characters together in order to perform follow-up attacks that have the potential to unleash devastating amounts of damage upon your enemies. As a whole, Trails of Cold Steel 3 is well and truly worth the purchase. If you've yet to get into the series, it's best to start from the beginning to get the full benefit of the experience. It is totally worth it and is bound to offer you hours of entertainment. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is an action role-playing game that presents the player with an immense world in which to explore. Matching the sheer size of the kingdom is the range of missions in which to undertake. Most of the quests are highly relevant to the overall narrative, whilst others can be undertaken as side activities, but they all still manage to feel integral to the overall experience. Players assume the role of Geralt, who is tasked with tracking down his adopted daughter from the clutches of an otherworldly force named the Wild Hunt. Throughout the journey, you will come to possess a generous amount of different weapons, magic, and skills that can all be leveled up through the skill tree system. Now, the system really allows players to experiment and to ultimately create a character that caters to their own specific style of play. From standard melee attacks, a handy dodge mechanic, and spells, there's plenty to get used to and utilize within each battle. Control is tight and responsive, which further enhances the overall feel of each encounter and never sees defeat being a result of poor design, rather just poor decision making on the player's behalf. The Witcher 3 is the perfect jumping on point for the series, so if you're looking for an intoxicating RPG to lose yourself in, The Witcher 3 deserves a spot in your collection. If there is one word that could sum up Persona 5, that word would have to be style. Everything from the characters, environments, to the music and visuals are presented in a way that lends the experience an extremely unique feel. As with many RPGs, the player will find themselves assuming the role of a mute hero who was sent to live with a family friend after a rather unfortunate encounter lands him in trouble with the law. Once there, he starts attending the local high school, which sees him forming bonds with several other students as they team up to unravel the several mysteries that surround the area. Gameplay is mainly split into two types. You'll find yourself participating in a wide range of activities that all benefit your character's proficiency within and outside of battle. The second being that of scouring dungeons and encountering a huge array of enemies, and it is here where the game's remarkable combat system comes into play. It's all turn-based in nature and revolves around special entities known as personas, which each character possesses. Through the use of these entities, it's possible to unleash devastating attacks and magical abilities that can really turn the tide of a battle. If you have yet to play Persona 5, it quite simply offers up the finest RPG experience available on the PS4 and is bound to satisfy both fans of the genre as well as newcomers alike. Well, that does it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to be notified of future videos. Until then, take care.